But these are not prepared remarks. This is off the top of my head. So here's where we start. We start with Dallas and the official story of Lee Harvey Oswald being the lone gunman shooting the president from behind. And that was the officially accepted story for a long, long time. And some people didn't like it, and they sort of deferred it. So I guess we start with learning the dark side of what was going on. And there's so much of the dark side that was going on that I don't almost know where to begin. JFK was not what we thought he was. We thought he was a brilliant, wonderful, idealistic person who had a vision of a new generation of Americans. And he spoke well, but he had a sexual problem, and he was the most sexually dysfunctional president in American history. Did I go into this in high school or not?
Yeah, you could go ahead. I really enjoyed when you had that presentation and you showed all the pictures and stuff. You know, people don't really realize that, but go ahead. Go. This is.
I don't have pictures for you today. I thought I was just going to be the judge, but this is all extemporaneous. I'm coming off the top of my head. So anyway, one of his mistresses was named Mary Pinchot Meyer, and she was a friend of Jackie Kennedy, and they were he was in love. I don't know if Kennedy was ever in love, but he was with this woman for 5 or 6 months, and probably the last person that he was with in that way. And when she heard about the Warren Commission report, she said, "This is such a lie. This is so wrong. I'm going to go public with this because this is all a whitewash. This is not what happened." And she was murdered 10 months after Kennedy was murdered, right after the Warren Commission report came out. And they said, oh, it was a black guy. And it turns out that the black guy was just a fisherman where she was walking. Turns out he had nothing to do with it. They never caught the murder. It was a hit. It was an execution.
Right.
There are many, many, many of these things.
And now she was married to Cordmeyer, right?
Yes, and he could have been one of the plotters too. So the idea is that what really happened, and what is most likely what happened, is that Lyndon Johnson was not liked by the Kennedys, and he was in trouble, and the Kennedys were digging up dirt on their vice president, ethical violations, because they did not want Lyndon Johnson on the 1964 ticket. The assassination occurs in 1963. Lyndon Johnson was going to possibly go to jail. And his political career was going to be over. And he knew it. So he really wanted Kennedy to come to Texas. And he actually left Washington months before to prepare Kennedy's trip to Texas, because that was where it was his last chance to become president of the United States and prevent himself from going to jail for ethical violations with Billy Saul Estes and Bobby Baker. That stuff in my book. I'm sure your students are not necessarily aware of that stuff. That's real deep history. So my idea, it's not just my idea. Many people have had this idea that Lyndon Johnson staged a coup d'etat and got rid of Kennedy, became the president, which is what he wanted to be all his life, and got the machinery started to cover up the crime. And Lee Harvey Oswald was set up. They knew he was there. He had a communist, Marxist credentials. Some CIA people were dealing with Oswald way back while he was in New Orleans. So Oswald didn't know what the heck was going on. At 9 o'clock in the morning, he was standing next to a fellow worker looking out the window and said, "What's going on out there?" And they said, "Kennedy's coming. Didn't you know that?" So Oswald is sitting in the lunchroom, and maybe he was standing in the doorway watching Kennedy go by. But they got him all framed being up in the 6th floor of the depository, shooting his rifle, killing Kennedy. So Oswald sees Kennedy shot, and he says, oh my God, they're going to put this on me. And so he gets into a taxi and gets onto a bus and goes to his rooming house and picks up his pistol. Now, if he was really going to kill Kennedy, he'd have brought his pistol with him.
Right.
But he's panicked and he's paranoid. And he's going to go, and he changes shirts, and he starts walking towards the Dallas Theater or the Texas Theater, carrying his pistol, and goes in and doesn't buy a ticket. He's so freaked out, the stupid idiot doesn't buy a ticket. So the cashier of the theater says, this man just snuck into the theater. They call the police come and arrest him, and that's the end of the Oswald part. He gets taken to the Dallas police headquarters, and he's there for 3 days. A guy named Jack Ruby, mafiosi, owns a nightclub, very familiar with the police, walks in the police station many times. Oswald has a press conference. He's asked a few questions. Ruby's in the back with his loaded gun in his pocket, but he doesn't do anything. The next day, Oswald is going to be taken and switched from the county jail to a more secure location, I guess. And he goes into the car or the place, the van that was going to take him. And Ruby has his opportunity, and he shoots him and kills him. Now, J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI, said, oh, Jack Ruby was just a nightclub owner who had striptease girls, and he was a friend of the police. That was all. Actually, Jack Ruby had deep mafia connections going all the way back to Al Capone. He knew every major mafia figure in the United States. When Bobby Kennedy saw how many telephone calls Jack Ruby made in a couple months before the assassination, he said, my God, Jack Ruby called almost everybody I invited in front of the Crime Commission in the Senate. So Jack Ruby basically was told, you got to silence the patsy. We don't want Oswald to have a lawyer and start saying he wasn't there, he didn't do this. You've got to put the guy away. And he did. The first visitor of Jack Ruby, after Jack Ruby shot Oswald, was the head of the mafia in Dallas. He had a nightclub called the Egyptian Lounge. He was a mafiosi figure. Probably said, Jack, don't you worry, we'll take care of you. You did a good job. So if I'm getting too detailed, you let me know.
Oh, no. I think that guy's name was Campisi, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. You got it. You can add in, you know a lot about this. So anytime you want to add stuff, please do.
No, I was just trying to remember because I end up, my senior year in high school, I moved down to Dallas, and we used to do all kinds of crazy stuff, like go down to Parkland because there was allegedly the room that you couldn't get into, and even back in those days, you could actually go to the Texas School Book Depository before the 6th floor. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Let's go back to Washington with Lyndon Johnson, who said, we got to pull this off. Now he's got some friends who want to start the Vietnam War and get it moving. Generals who think Kennedy is a traitor to the United States because of what he did in Cuba. He sold out the United States. He was a traitor and he should be assassinated. There were people in the military who felt that way. General Lansdale, one of them. So Lyndon Johnson with a couple CIA figures, I have to remember their names now, not just Cord Meyer, but Angleton, who was the head of counterintelligence. He was a spook, and he listened in on anything. He listened to Kennedy's trysts with women. He was like J. Edgar Hoover, a real voyeur. So he learned all sorts of things about Kennedy, and he was in, I think, on the plot. There were probably 4 or 5 CIA figures. But how are you going to do this? There's a guy named William Harvey, fat, cigar-smoking alcoholic, who was the head of CIA Black Ops. His job was to hire assassins. He hired assassins in Europe. Kennedy thought he was crazy. He walked around with a gun in his pocket in a suit. And Kennedy met him once. He said, "You're America's James Bond, aren't you?" Harvey hated Bobby Kennedy, and he hated Jack. And he, the CIA guy, William Harvey, happens to be really close friends with Johnny Rosselli. Johnny Rosselli, Mafia, Hollywood. He was a handsome mafiosi, dressed well, knew all of the mafia figures, but he knew a lot of government figures too. So they called him Uncle Johnny in William Harvey's household. And Harvey and Rosselli, in my view, my theory, that's how the mafia connects. The mafia hated Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy was putting 700 mafia figures away. They needed to kill Bobby Kennedy, but they couldn't kill Bobby Kennedy because if they did, Jack Kennedy, the president, would kill them. You got to kill the head of the snake, they said. So the major mafia figures are Sam Giancana in Chicago, Carlos Marcello, where you guys live, Louisiana. Are you in Louisiana?
Not Texas, but
Okay.
Marcello controlled Texas and Louisiana too, and he controlled all the stuff in Dallas for sure.
And then there's Trafficante in Florida. So it goes to Sam Giancana, who sends a team to Dallas. And his job is to do the Kennedy hit. Now, this is all being coordinated by a CIA guy named David Phillips, who went under the pseudonym Maurice Bishop. He's setting up at Dallas. He said, okay, you guys do this here, you do this there. One of the guys has some connection with Oswald. One guy named Milwaukee Phil, fat guy. His job is to kind of keep an eye on Oswald inside the depository. Where's he going? What's he doing? I don't know if he ever met Oswald, but his job was to keep an eye on him. They were getting him set up, but I don't think Oswald knew what was happening. Oswald did think he was connected with a guy named Howard Hunt, and Howard Hunt had something to do with Oswald, and Oswald wasn't sure what was going on. On November 8th, he writes to Mr. Hunt a letter. This letter did not surface for 10 years. But the letter said, "Mr. Hunt, what the hell is going on? What am I supposed to be doing? I don't think anything should happen until I hear more." It's a very controversial letter. I believe it's genuine. His name was Howard Hunt, CIA guy. If this is too complex, you let me know. So anyway.
Is that the same as E. Howard Hunt?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So Giancana sets up the hit team, made up of Johnny Rosselli, who's just greasing the wheels, a guy named Chucky Nicoletti, who's next to the Texas School Book Depository, and a young 21-year-old, he called himself a hillbilly from Chicago, but originally from the South, named James Files. And he's been in the Army. He knows explosives. He knows weapons. And they said, listen, you stay at the grassy knoll. We're going to try to hit Kennedy from behind. But if we don't hit him from behind, you got to hit him in the front. Okay? You wait. So Files is there with his Remington Fireball. It's a new weapon, about this big. It's half of can you see my hands?
Right.
It's like a long pistol with a scope on it. Fires one bullet. So he's just following orders from Chucky Nicoletti, who's trying to hit Kennedy from behind. He hits him in the throat. Kennedy goes forward. Another bullet flies. Kennedy's still there. James Files says, I see it. I don't know what to do, but he has not been hit in the head. And so James Files says, it was an easy shot. And he shot him in the right temple, right here. and killed him. Basically, it was a frangible mercury round that explodes on impact. And if you watch the Zapruder film, you can see this splash of blood from Kennedy's head. And of course, the Warren Commission said, no, he was hit from behind by Oswald. But the reality is that's a lie. Kennedy was hit from the front, and all of the brain matter goes back. And there was a motorcycle patrolman 10 feet to the rear of Kennedy who was covered by so much blood, he thought he was hit. He's in my book. I forgot his name. But anyway, the Warren Commission is changing the story. They're changing the autopsy. They're changing everything. They're putting his skull back together again. His brain goes missing after the autopsy because it's probably got speckles of mercury from the round that James Files shot into his brain. And they don't want that to be known. So his brain is missing. Anyway.
Do you also think, Dr. Kroth, that possibly that a lot of his brain could have been emptied out from the gunshots too?
Yes, but there was still brain matter there.
Right. So
temporal lobe.
Right. So what you're saying is even that's missing then?
The whole brain is missing, yes. So anyway, they're doing an autopsy. By the way, Johnson says, we must take the body back to Washington. And they said, no. According to Texas law, anyone murdered in Texas, the autopsy must occur in Texas. And the body must stay here. And Johnson said, ain't staying here, pal. We're taking him back to Washington right now. There was a shoving match with the Dallas district attorney. And so they took Kennedy's back. And Johnson had a general supervising the autopsy and making sure that everything was done just right. The bullet came in the back, yeah. 3 shots, 2 in the head, blah, blah. And so one photographer worked in the Navy, 35 years old, takes photographs and movies of the autopsy and says to himself, this is such a lie. This is so incorrect. I'm going to save some of these films of the autopsy and make duplicates for myself. This is terrible. Pitzer, I think his name was. So he keeps his mouth shut. The autopsy goes, the Warren Commission report is written, and a few years later, he's going to retire from the Navy. Oh, really? Yeah, he's going to retire from the Navy and work for some media outlet. Oh, really? So does he have, nobody knows whether, but they're watching all these people. So guess who kills himself? This 35-year-old guy who's retiring from the Navy. Mm-hmm. And he's thought to have had pictures of the autopsy that would have proved something. His family said he didn't kill himself. He was not even depressed. He was looking forward to his retirement from the Navy. Dead. There are 73 people who are dead under suspicious circumstances that I have in my books. So anyway, where are we now? We're after the autopsy.
Mm-hmm.
So now Johnson goes, and he's the president, moves Jackie out of the White House. James Files drives back to Chicago, gets $35,000, never says a thing about the assassination. Giancana says, it was such a good job. Only one person in the whole country knew what happened. Because everybody had different jobs. Nobody knew the big plan.
Mm-hmm.
So we are now setting up the Warren Commission. And Chief Justice Earl Warren is the head of the Supreme Court. Everybody respects Earl Warren. Johnson calls him and says, I want you to be the head of the commission studying the assassination of the president. Now you tell me when it's my time to stop, or I don't know when I'm just going to keep going.
Okay, yeah. I'd like for the kids to maybe ask you some questions. Marcus, you have a question at this point?
Yeah.
So Oswald didn't kill JFK?
No, I don't think so.
Huh.
Yeah, you've been lied to all these years, Marcus.
That's right. Never fired a shot. Never killed a person in his life. Shot himself in the elbow once. Loved his wife. Had just had a baby. Just had a second child.
Yeah, there's a lot of. Anyone else have a question? Now, give you a little background, Jerry. These people are taking an introduction to a law enforcement class, and this is probably one of the best investigations to look into, because on the local level and even on the federal level, there was tremendous amount of manipulation of evidence, facts, and investigations that would go completely crazy. I don't think this all happened by coincidence, correct?
Absolutely. But, you know, from the point of view of your law enforcement people, there's a lot of evidence assembled by all the pro-Warren Commission people that would convict Oswald. They found a palm print on the bottom part of the rifle.
Mm-hmm.
No fingerprints, no paraffin on his face after shooting the rifle, but his palm print. Well, his mother said they took his body and they put the rifle on his hand so they could have a palm print. So there's every piece of evidence that you come up with. There's a pro and a con on every one of them.
Oh, yeah. And someone would be totally inadmissible. It appears that the backyard photo was probably, well, okay, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the Dallas police and some of the Dallas County sheriffs were out there at 2515 West 5th Street. And then they knock on the door to Miss Payne, and Miss Payne lets them in, and she says, well, you've been expected. And she gives them all kinds of stuff, materials that were Oswald's, including, I guess, the backyard photo, because according to Michael Payne, which he wasn't living there, but he said he was. According to Michael Payne, he saw that picture on that Friday night, and they said they didn't get it till Saturday after they got the search warrant, but they got most all the material on Friday before the search warrant. So they needed to get rid of Oswald because there was no way that this stuff could hold up in court. A good defense attorney would have it'd be inadmissible. Chapman versus United States, 1961. States say the landlord can't give a right to permission or volunteer a search for other people's property. So there's some really strange deals. What do you know about 1026 North Beckley?
Where his rooming house?
Yeah, I've been listening to some people lately, and they said that he may not have really even lived there.
His landlady said he did.
Yeah, his landlady said he did, but if you look, it just so many kind of crazy. Of course, he wasn't there then that Thursday night, and then there was somebody who was saying that normally Fraser would drive him to work. So I don't know if Fraser went in. He didn't ride the bus a lot, so that kind of does away with his getaway on the bus too. That doesn't make any sense as well. If you're going to do public transportation, that's not a good getaway.
Well, he went to Marina's house the night before the assassination.
Right. At 2515 West 5th Street in Irving. And have you ever been in that house?
No, but I've been in contact with Ruth Payne's son.
Oh, wow. What'd she have to say?
She doesn't like talking about it. But her son, he says, I don't want my mother to be disturbed, but I'm very interested in it. I said, well, why did this happen? And why did your mother do that? And why? And he has answered some of my questions. I don't think Ruth Payne is part of any conspiracy.
Well, there's a lot of things that happen that should not have happened, but that house is so small. I mean, it's just 2-bedroom house, and it's a museum now. So you go to the city of Irving, you could actually go through it. And that garage, oh my gosh, it'd be hard to fit a king size bed in it. It is really, really a tiny, tiny house. You know, it would be hard pressed to actually see somebody be storing a gun or something in there that you couldn't, a rifle, if you couldn't, you would.
She knew there was a rifle there, and she knew that it was gone.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting too. There's a lot of.
Well, Well, you know, this is probably, your students are probably saying, oh my God, there's too much information here.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
So maybe we should just do the big picture.
Okay, do big picture. You keep on doing
Or
big.
let me finish the big picture.
Okay, good.
So we got the Warren Commission and the job, and I was telling you about Earl Warren, most respected person in the United States. And he says to Lyndon Johnson, no, I will not head up this commission. I'm the head of the Supreme Court. I do not want to do this. And J. Edgar Hoover had some kind of sexual stuff about Earl Warren. And Lyndon Johnson said, Mr. Warren, you want this information of what you did in Mexico City to come out? And Earl Warren starts crying and says, I'll do anything you want. I lost you. You just got frozen. Mike, you just got frozen. Everybody got frozen. Hi, Marcus. I lost Mike.
Oh, you probably lagged out, if anything.
I'm still here.
Hmm.
Mike just dropped out.
We still have like, let's see, like 4 minutes, 5 minutes until class ends.
Where are you, Marcus? Are you in Texas?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure we're all in Texas, considering we're all in the same district.
I see. Are you guys in school or are you just at home?
We're all at home right now, and there's gonna be an option to go back. I think it's October 18th or October 28th, where you can choose to go to school or stay home.
What are you going to do?
Probably gonna choose to go because I don't know. I think physical learning is just better for me.
Yeah. I wonder, it would freak me out to be a teacher in a high school.
It's gonna be pesky considering you have to manage a digital class because there are going to be some students who want to stay back and then there are going to be some who want to go forward.
Yeah. My screen says you're still recording. It's the flashing light goes on and on, like you're still recording.
I'm assuming he's recording this and he must have lagged out, but I'm assuming this recording is gonna be what's it called? It's gonna be shown after, like he's gonna put it on the Google Classroom. That way kids that missed it or want to know more, they'll just watch this video and then they'll just.
Do you think I should keep talking?
I mean, yeah. I mean he's not here, but we're still listening to you.
Well, I'll tell you the rest of the story about Earl Warren crying in front of Johnson, saying, okay, I'll do anything. So that kind of sets it up to mean that whatever the Warren Commission came up with is going to be just what Lyndon Johnson wanted. And so the witnesses they called and all of that is just one big 26-volume piece of cover-up. So they didn't interview the mafia people. They did interview all sorts of irrelevant people. And the strangest thing of all is the name of Allen Dulles. Allen Dulles was a head honcho at the CIA. And when the Bay of Pigs thing happened in Cuba, Kennedy fired Allen Dulles. Didn't like Allen Dulles. Thought Allen Dulles was conceited and took the law into his own hands. And here Lyndon Johnson appoints Allen Dulles, a guy that Kennedy fired, to investigate Kennedy's murder. So Allen Dulles is really heading up the Warren Commission with Chief Justice Earl Warren. And he attends virtually every session because he's making sure that just the right story comes out. So that's the end of the Warren Commission. And a couple people on the Warren Commission thought it was a cover-up, one of whom died in a strange airplane accident. So that's kind of the end of the story until the conspiracy literature starts 10 years later. So that's about the story of the Kennedy assassination that I wanted to tell you guys. So you could stop recording if you want.
So, like, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Let's say, just out of the blue, out of nowhere, maybe it'll never happen. Likely, definitely, probably like unlikely. But if it does happen, let's say someone manages to compile just damning, very damning evidence, and then like, or there's like a new evidence, and it just proves like 100% that Oswald is, you know, just an average Joe that just got framed. Like let's say like that just comes out, and then like what would the government do?
Well, the government would say that's wrong, and whoever said that is wrong. And they've had that experience before, and the government comes back and says it's all wrong, and Oswald did it. And there are many, many writers and authors who will agree with the government and say the government is telling the truth, and all these people like Dr. Kroth are conspiracy nuts making up stories, and that's the government reply. There are 600 books on this subject, and a large number of them are the whitewash kind that say, no, Oswald really was a criminal, a terrorist, a person who hated Kennedy. He actually had a Life magazine book on his, he and his wife really liked Kennedy, and they admired him. But these people will tell that story. That's how our history is written.
And I'm assuming if you were to try to rewrite it, you'd, I don't know, if you're not with the government, you're not going to be in a really good situation.
Who, me?
No. I'd say like if you were to try, now let's say someone does have they compile a bunch of really damning evidence, and you were to try to use it against the government, I'd imagine you're not going to have a fun time.
No, you know, that's the funny thing. You'd think that if Lyndon Johnson planned this, well, Lyndon Johnson's dead. Why doesn't somebody come forward and say it was all Lyndon Johnson who did it, and here's the truth? And instead, all of these documents are held in reserve. You can't see them. They're redacted for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. They just released some in 2018, some more in 2019. They've been holding these documents back. Why? Because they're hiding stuff. And it's gone beyond Lyndon Johnson. It's now, I don't know, they call it the deep state. But somebody else, some shadow government is running the show and has been doing that. Dwight Eisenhower, the president, when in 50s, warned people about the military-industrial complex. I think somebody's trying to come back to life.
Yeah, my computer just went down completely, so I have no idea what was going on. So
we decided Kennedy was still alive.
Oh my gosh! Now that was actually a rumor back when I was in high school, and he was alive as a vegetable in a certain room in Parkland Hospital, and people would go down there and actually look. And I mean, that was like a real big deal. So I laughed, but you know, that's how gullible people were. There's no way that the guy could have lived, and there's no way that they could be working on him. And why would you need a tracheotomy if you had half your head missing? That doesn't make sense.
Okay, so that was just a joke, but we're glad to have you back. Marcus has been running the show and has been asking great questions while you were gone.
That was really good. I'm proud of Marcus. That's absolutely excellent. He got to listen to Dr. Fetzer this morning, and I said that so he gets to hear like both ends of the spectrum of different people to talk about. But getting back to the idea of setting up Oswald, how important do you think that is to the concept that they had other people to set up too? Like there was an alleged hit in Chicago and an alleged hit in Miami, and the one in Chicago didn't work out simply because he didn't get to go or something. But
I haven't worked out, but I've read about these things, but I didn't do specific research on it. But I do believe that they probably had a patsy set up in Florida, and they had one in Chicago. And frankly, what's that mean? I'm hearing a noise.
Keep on going.
Over the course of the years, I'm starting to believe that Sirhan Sirhan was set up to murder Bobby Kennedy. And I think that Lyndon Johnson could have been behind that. I can explain why, but I haven't researched it, but I think there's very good circumstantial evidence about that. And I'll tell you why if you're interested.
Oh, yeah.
So Johnson knows that he killed Kennedy, and he knows that Bobby Kennedy is lying. Bobby Kennedy in 1967, 66 says, I believe the Warren Commission, I believe what they said is true. And all of Bobby Kennedy's friends said, bullshit. That's not how Bobby Kennedy truly feels. But publicly, Bobby always said he believed in the Warren Commission and he had no interest in any of these conspiracy theories. Lyndon Johnson knew that if Bobby Kennedy ever became president, the first thing he would do would investigate his brother's assassination. So Bobby Kennedy is deciding he's going to run for president. And Hubert Humphrey is the designated Democratic nominee. And Bobby Kennedy is entering the 1968 race late. But he goes to California, and if he wins the primary, he's really got a shoe-in to become the next Democratic presidential candidate. So Lyndon Johnson is sitting there saying, oh God, we can't let Bobby Kennedy run for president. And Bobby Kennedy wins the California primary. And Johnson says, okay, it's time to pull the trigger. And that's exactly what happens. As soon as he wins the California primary, he's killed.
Yeah, it's on to Chicago, and let's win there. And he turns around, goes a couple steps, and then they have the firing. And that's a really interesting deal, too, because there are extra shots than there were in his pistol. And then evidently somebody may have come from behind and shot Robert Kennedy because it was, did the autopsy report say it was powder burns on the back of his head? And
there were 9 bullets or 12 bullets fired, and the gun didn't hold that many bullets.
Right, and then it's amazing, and they probably all may be tied in together because, like you said, Johnson is worried about his legacy at that point too. I've also read the point. I don't know. You may know about this, or I know you know about it, but when he came on TV and said he wasn't going to run or accept the nomination, I think he was trying to do a power play, hoping that the people would actually want him back and then do that. I'm not so sure he really wanted them to take up on it, not to do it.
No, I think he really did want to quit. He was tired. The Vietnam War was getting him down. He had achieved his life's ambition was to be president, and he really did want to quit. But he thought he wanted to get he wanted it so that no one would reopen the can of worms of the Kennedy assassination either.
Yeah, because he was not an old man, but the presidency took a toll out of him that he looked horrible by the time he got out.
Yeah, well, the Vietnam War was the worst decision he made outside of killing the president.
Oh, man. Jay, it's good. Okay. Are there any more questions from any of the students are listening, or would you like to hear some more from Jerry? Because I can't really see about the students at this point because I'm on my phone now. My computer kind of blanked out.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead and try to explain a little bit more about the cover-up and how it's continuing even past the 60s up to today. Or maybe even explain why it's important for people to study it today after all these years.
Well, I mean, there's just all these professors and who come out and write books and say this conspiracy theory is wrong, and Mary Pinchot Meyer died and it had nothing to do with the Warren Commission. And James Files, one guy said, a very distinguished professor, said James Files, he wasn't even in Dallas. He's a liar. And he couldn't have shot Kennedy. He was attending the birth of his daughter. And he was in the hospital in Dallas, in Chicago. He wasn't there. Well, I got in touch with James Files when he was in prison for something else. And I said, this is what a guy says about you. Were you actually in the hospital watching your daughter get born? And he said, yes, I was. Only trouble is my daughter was born 3 years after Kennedy was shot.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of disinformation and lying and trying to discredit witnesses. By the way, Howard Hunt, who was a lower level CIA guy, he was the basis of my book. He always denied that he was in Dallas. He said he had nothing to do with the Kennedy assassination. But his son, who was a bit of a rebel, came to see his dad in the late 1990s or early 2000s. His dad was dying in Florida. And he said, Dad, how about telling me the truth about the assassination? And so his father started to talk, and he recorded what his father said. And he said, Lyndon Johnson did it. He had the help of the CIA. And then he said, Dad, what did you do? And he said, I'm not going to say what I did, even to you, because I married a second time, and I promised my wife that I would have nothing to do with this. And I don't want any bad stuff coming down upon my wife. So he didn't completely tell his son what he did, but he laid out the basic outline of my book, which was his deathbed confession to his son.
Yeah, St. John, huh?
His son has a funny name. His son is named St. John Hunt.
Right. And that was from his first wife, correct?
His first wife was, his first wife was killed in a mysterious plane crash.
Yeah, wasn't she allegedly taking money to some or something? There's something involved in Watergate deal, and she goes down on that airplane
Right.
outside of Chicago, if I remember correctly.
St. John Hunt has written a book about his mother's death, and he also thinks it was a conspiracy.
Wow. Now, do you ever think that people worry there's too many conspiracies out there, or do you think that you think it's good just to question stuff?
I think that the government is really involved in a mass disinformation and assassination campaign. I think that J. Edgar Hoover and members of the CIA had something like a hit squad going, and they were trying to eliminate, like just the mafia. They behave the way the mafia does. If somebody opens their mouth, they're dead. I mean, almost all of the people that they called in the 1970s to testify from the mafia about the Kennedy assassination. Almost every single one of them was murdered.
Wow.
But they said the movie, you know, John Giancana was shot. All of James Files' bosses were shot. Johnny Rosselli was cut up into pieces and thrown into the Miami harbor. All of the major mafia figures connected to the assassination were killed. And it's, of course, it's all coincidence.
And it was either right before or right after they testified, because I think Rosselli, wasn't he cut up and thrown into Miami Harbor right after he secretly testified, and the other ones were right before they were going to be testifying?
Exactly. And he was going to write a book, too, a tell-all book.
Oh, wow. Do you think that you think we'll ever know the truth?
No. I think that if we have a revolution in this country, maybe, deep state still exists. Trump said he was going to release all the remaining documents in 2021. I don't think Trump's going to be elected again. But if he did, the hottest documents are still waiting to be released next year.
Oh, wow. What do you anticipate that they have that we don't know about? What would be some of the ones on the agenda, you think?
I don't know, probably CIA involvement. And one of the documents that was released in April of 2019 was about a French assassin who came to New York in November and left through the Texas border 2 weeks after the assassination. That was withheld for 55 years. That was an FBI report on a French assassin. Those are the kind of documents that have been hidden for 50 years.
Yeah. I guess it's to cover up, because surely most of those people have passed, but I guess it's to cover up the potential of the government ever looking into it. And it doesn't appear that most of the politicians who are pretty much supported by the deep state will ever really come out and give the information either. So if Trump didn't do it, I guess probably not too many people will at some point, you think?
That's right. Let me give you one more document that I discovered last year that was really cool. Jack Ruby said, of course, he was seen as just a nightclub owner who wasn't even around at the time of the assassination. Actually, Jack Ruby was being followed by an FBI informant. And this report was written by an FBI informant. Jack Ruby says to the informant, who thinks he's just his friend, he said, you know, Kennedy's coming today. Let's go down and watch the fireworks. So this is that Jack Ruby actually stood in front of the Texas School Book Depository in order to watch the fireworks. He knew what was going to happen. And that document was withheld for 53 years.
Yeah. Kelly, you have a question? Unmute and ask Dr. Kroth.
So, like you mentioned before, you said that how Trump, if he wins, plans to release those documents that weren't released earlier on. If he does end up releasing them, do you think something would end up happening to Trump for releasing that information?
I can't hear the question. Can you
Okay, the question was, you said something about Trump if he won re-election, or somebody won re-election and gave out the rest of the information, you think something would happen to them?
No, I think Trump, he doesn't care. And he said, I'll release the documents. And he said, I'll investigate UFOs. Trump is definitely not under anybody's thumb. I mean, he is under somebody's thumb because he can't do the kinds of things that he wanted to do, getting troops out of Afghanistan and Syria. He's hamstrung there, but he's a rebel, and he'll let the Kennedy documents out, and he'll even let out information about UFOs too, I think.
Well, you think if he doesn't win re-election, do you think that maybe on January 19th, all of a sudden all these things might be released?
I don't think they'll be released. No, if Biden wins, and I'm afraid I'm a supporter of Biden. But I don't think they'll release those documents, and I don't think they'll do anything about UFOs, and we'll continue with the secrecy.
Yeah, I was saying on the way, on the way out of office, I didn't know if Trump would try to just say, what the heck, I just release it, if he could at the end is what I was thinking. I don't know.
Oh, that would be interesting. You mean as a final goodbye? Well, here's some documents. That would be cool.
Yeah, I mean, well, what the heck? If you didn't really care if you were a rebel, that's kind of one of those deals, that, okay, you're fired. No, I quit, and here you have at it. So I don't know.
Oh, that's a great theory. I hope that's true.
Yeah, it'd be anxious to know, because I think Biden, whatever you think of Biden, I think he's probably much more in the cloth of the Bushes and some of the other people, much more into the establishment than Trump is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but politics is politics. I don't think we ever consider politics. But speaking about politics and speaking about Kennedy a second, what policies do you think Kennedy did that really cost him his job and his life?
I think that he was to the left, and I think what he did in Cuba made a lot of people angry, especially anti-Castro Cubans. But I really think the person who got John F. Kennedy killed was Bobby Kennedy. He got his brother killed because he kept going after the mafia. His father said, "Stop this. This is dangerous to the family." But his father never told Bobby that he himself had connections to the mafia.
Right.
And
did his father experience a stroke early on in Kennedy's presidency? Do you think that maybe he was suffering and didn't really, if he had not suffered the stroke, do you think that things would have turned out differently?
No, I think that Jack did not tell Bobby that he was sleeping with a mafia mistress, Judy Campbell. He didn't tell Bobby about his relationship. I mean, Bobby Kennedy arrests Sam Giancana, and Jack Kennedy is sleeping with Sam Giancana's girlfriend. That doesn't make any sense. Somebody's not telling Bobby the family secrets. And Dad had something to do with Joseph Costello, the mafia head. He had something to do with Giancana, and Giancana had something to do with Jack. And here goes Bobby, the crusader, trying to put away the mafia. And J. Edgar Hoover, by the way, was scared to death that Bobby Kennedy would hurt the mafia because Hoover's homosexuality would be exposed. So it all comes back to Bobby Kennedy's behavior. That's why Kennedy was assassinated, in my view. And of course, Lyndon Johnson adds into this because he would have gone to jail on his own. So he had a perfect partner in getting the mafia to get involved in this plot.
Okay, and then you mentioned earlier you think that LBJ had something maybe to do with Bobby Kennedy's removal from presidency opportunities too. Do you think if Robert Kennedy had won in '68 that things would be different today?
Oh, absolutely. I think I can't prove this. Let me say I can't prove this at all. It's just a suspicion. But if Bobby became president, we'd have gotten out of Vietnam. Lyndon Johnson would have been prosecuted for the murder of John Kennedy, and the world would have been a different place.
Yeah, we probably never had Jimmy Carter or Gerald Ford or Nixon as presidents for sure.
Absolutely. He'd have been president and had 2 terms.
Yeah, and then probably Teddy would have been no Chappaquiddick either, probably either.
Well, that was getting drunk with a girl, right, in the car.
Yeah. But I mean, it wouldn't have probably happened. Maybe I don't know. It's hard to say. But if we were going to, I know we have about 15 minutes left. If you were going to explain, because this is a new group of kids, if you were going to explain to them what could they do as young adults or young students, what can they do to actually get more interested or read more about it, or what should they do to learn more about the Kennedy assassination? Besides reading your book.
So many books. I'd recommend my book, I'd recommend a guy named Jim Marrs, Marrs, who wrote a wonderful book on the mafia connections. Then there's Gerald Posner's book, who says this is the Warren Commission's story, and he's right, and Oswald actually killed everybody. So those three books I think are important. I think I would also advise your students to be skeptical. We're living in an age of fake news and disinformation and lying and distortions. And why are we in Syria? You know, we're occupying another country that doesn't want us there, and nobody even asks why we're there. So there are a lot of funny things going on in the world, and it's very, very difficult to get your hands on something. I guess my advice to your students would be focus in on one thing that you're interested in, go for that, because otherwise it's just too much chaos in the world right now.
And I was telling them earlier that you had a YouTube video that was very successful on about JFK. Did it eventually? It went right to 1 million, didn't it?
Not to 1 million, but a lot. It's called the JFK Assassination: What Really Happened. Check it out.
Yeah, and how many do you lack from 1 million? It's just a couple thousand, isn't it?
I haven't looked it up. I had 3.2 million people watch my videos, but I have videos on a lot of different subjects.
Okay.
But Kenny, one of the more popular ones.
Right, and that one, I know you're all excited because it went over 900,000 and it was going like really gangbusters, and then all of a sudden, I guess it wasn't so much. Do you think? And you mentioned just something, because I saw your other video. Explain to us a little bit about this COVID, and do you think COVID will change any now since President Trump has come down with COVID too?
Well, we're out of control. Our country is out of control. We're the worst country in the world when it comes to cases and deaths. We did not behave the way we should have. We should have tested earlier. We should have been prepared. You know, the governor of Florida just said we're going to open up the entire state. I mean, there's a lot of denial going on COVID. We're not behaving the way Cuba or New Zealand or South Korea behave. They've got things under control, and we're out of control. And I would feel afraid to go to a high school classroom right now. You know, as a teacher who's 50 years old, catching COVID from one of my students, I don't think it makes a great deal of sense what's happening in Texas, Florida, and throughout the country. I think
you brought up a point which we could easily address. We go back to school. We're virtual this week. This is our 7th week of being virtual. We have one more week of being virtual. Then we go back a week from Tuesday, virtual and a blended system. AISD, Austin Independent School District, is going in Monday, and they have like 200 and some teachers are protesting, and you know, a lot of people are really worried, but they're going to give us face shields and this kind of stuff. Originally, they thought that maybe 40% of the students would be back. We have about 3,500 students, but I think that percentage has gone way down. I know here at Hayes, I live in the Hayes School District, and many of my family work at Hayes. But anyways, make a long story short, Hayes High School had like 900 the first day, 600 the next day. Now they're down to 300.
How about you? Are you worried?
Not really. I kind of, if I was in a more high traffic area, I'm kind of by myself in my room, and you're always going to be worried, but you know, I'm not that worried. But also, I guess you got to be more aware of stuff. You know, you can't be like maybe what President Trump was doing, walking around without a mask on and everything. So
you'll teach your classes all day long with a mask on, and all your students will have a mask on all day long?
Yeah. And
how many will be inside a room where you're teaching?
That's a very good question. We don't really know until next week because they still are changing. I had this class here has like 34 people in it. I do not know how many of the people will actually come back. It appears that in most of the classes, somewhere between 20 and maybe 30% of the people will come back, but then they divide that in half. So that would be like 50% would come Monday and Wednesday, then 15% would come Tuesday and Thursday, and then Friday, everything would be virtual. So we are actually looking at a system which is really all messed up because you're teaching basically blended things. So now we're going to have to be on a doc cam in front of a computer, talking to people that live, like I'm talking to you, and have people in front of me talking to them. And it's difficult. This way here is not really good for learning, but it's really good for safety. I have several students that have had COVID. My sister passed away of COVID, but she had stage 4 lung cancer, and she was doing pretty good. But then she got COVID and she died. But they put that as COVID death. So a lot of them are attributable to other things. But she did succumb to that, and I know a lot of people that have had people in their family that have passed from it. Contributing factors, diabetes or something else too, and had it. And our principal has had COVID and was very, very sick. So I think he lost like 35 pounds. And I have a person I've been working with in South Africa for many years, and he's lost 60 pounds. Basically, they thought it was just a cold, and then they discovered he had diabetes, and then I think he had COVID as well. So some of these things it hits some people really, really hard. Other people, it's not so bad. It's scary.
So listen, do you do a lot of testing in your school and of yourself and your students?
Well, we hadn't gone back, but they are going to test the teachers every day for temperature, and they have screening deals to where as the kids come through to come into the school, everybody will be screened. So if somebody shows to have a temperature coming in, they'll stop them at the door and they won't be able to stay in school. Then they have sanitary methods. They have what sounds prepared, like we're going to be dressed up. I'll probably be wearing scrubs to work every day, and we got face shields and masks, and we're looking like something out of the Jetsons or something like that. So it's
well, on the more optimistic side, I got a friend who's a doctor and wears those clothes every day, and he's been dealing with COVID now for 6 months. Comes home, takes his stuff off, throws it away, new masks, new gloves. He's got 2 children. He's okay. So I wish you well. I hope it works out. And guess who has to go now?
Oh, you got to go?
I think it's time for me to go, unless you got...
No, thank you so much, Jerry. Thank you so much. Bye.
I'd like to have a pass so I can leave the building.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm trying to find out what happened to my computer, and
my best to all your Julia, Gabriella, Kelly, and all the other guys. Julissa, take care, you guys. Good luck.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to try to get on the other computer. I'll see you guys in just a second, okay? Try and get